So the original Takahashi-Alexander model was a model to estimate the future cash flows and valuations associated with the private equity portfolio. And this reading, Takahashi-Alexander Revisited, basically looks at that model and says, okay, it had some shortcomings. What are those shortcomings? And can we come up with a variation of that model that basically improves on the shortcomings? And so that's the entire paper. So again, always on these readings to focus on the learning objectives. So first they ask us to look at the challenges associated with actually trying to estimate future return expectations for private equity type funds. So you want to definitely know, all these different, well, there's only 3 that we mentioned, these different challenges and what they are. And the solution is essentially to develop sort of a better cash flow forecasting model for private equity. And then here we look at essentially the criteria associated with the original model being simple, simplistic, incorporating actual data, etc. So this is not a learning objective. It's just if we don't cover a good portion of the curriculum, whether it's, well, let me phrase that differently. If we only cover the learning objectives and there's no stream of thought in our presentation, and it becomes hard to follow anything. But I'll stress what the learning objectives are. So challenges is a learning objective. This just basically describes criteria for that model. And that original model had 6 inputs, and it gave 1 output, 1 estimate. The output of cash flows being for contributions, distributions, and the NAV of the fund. What we are asked to know is what the inputs are for the original Takahashi-Alexander model. So you should know these. These are the 6 inputs. And then, of course, the Bow factor that describes the distributions that are paid by the fund to investors is a key word here. And then in terms of the model, remember we said it has 6 inputs. It also has 3 equations related to the outputs, the capital calls, the distributions, and the NAV. You're not expected to know these equations, but again, you should know what the inputs are into that original model. And as with any model, the output is only as good as the input that you select. And then another learning objective is knowing the limitations of that original model. So that's sort of really the premise of this reading, right, of this article, is that that original model had some limitations. Here are the limitations, things like the, assumptions of the model being flawed, for example. So we definitely want to know what those limitations are. And then that being the premise of the model, they suggest, a different type of model to improve on that. And that different type of model is using historical simulations of cash flows. That's the HS, or historical simulation model, that this reading or this article introduces. So